Okay, call to order the July 1st, 2020 Wetlands Commission meeting. First item on the agenda is Colt Highway LLC, 299 Colt Highway.
I believe we have both Ben and Tom Daly. So Ben, if you want to start, you're welcome.
Sure. So my understanding is the commission did a site walk last week, correct?
Correct.
And so were there any questions or concerns that arose from the visit?
I don't believe so. No. So I don't know if you had, I don't think there was really anything outstanding. You had agreed to epoxy coating the garage floor, correct?
Yeah, if that's a condition imposed by the commission, then that's something we're willing to do. I guess I don't really understand the benefit of that, I guess, because I'm wondering where, because the concern is if there's some sort of, I guess, leak from an automobile. So if there's an epoxy coating on that floor, just in a practical sense, my thought is, where's that liquid going to go? Right? It would just run off the floor into the surrounding area. So I mean, it's something we'd agree to do if it's something that the commission thinks is necessary. I wouldn't want to kind of spend an unnecessary expense if it's not really providing a practical benefit.
Okay, Bob, do you want to speak to that? 'Cause I think you had referenced that item.
I guess I would respond with a question. Is that your final answer?
Well, as I mentioned, if it's something that the commission feels is providing a practical benefit and you'd like us to do, then yes, we're agreeable.
Yeah, for safety reasons, because of how close you are to the storm basins, things of that nature. I'm not looking for something like that on the other three, but this one in particular, simply because of its location. I just think that would be a prudent thing to do.
Okay.
And then if if I still have the floor, the one thing I would also suggest is changing out silt fence for silt sock. At least for this particular garage location, because of how close it is to the stormwater basin.
And it's Tom Daly. We have no objection to that. We'll revise the plan for that.
But seeing as how I got called in out of order, I guess now we'll start going back. Rich?
I have no questions.
Emily?
No questions this evening.
Dave?
Yeah, just one thing. Last time I thought we had talked about putting some gravel down behind the garage by the drip line of the roof that's heading that way. I just, after seeing what was happening this afternoon, there's a chance that there could be a whole lot of water coming off that roof. And it's really vegetated, the downslope. But I'm just a little bit concerned that, especially just right after construction, if you got this stream of water coming down onto soil that's probably disturbed because of the construction, that it might cause a problem. And I thought the gravel was a good idea.
And Ben, it's Tom Daly. You were okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, then yes, we will incorporate that into the final plans.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Robert?
Yeah, just a comment about the epoxy coating, that I support having the epoxy coating because it will also limit how quickly any liquids would soak into the concrete. So while there is the possibility anything that's spilled is going to be pushed out into the driveway, it also would be the expectation that if there is a significant spill that speedy dryer absorbent of some sort would be used, and it's consistent with other garages that we have approved within the regulated area to wetlands. So just a comment that I support the chairman's recommendation on the epoxy coating. That's all.
Was that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Mark is not here, correct?
Correct. I haven't seen him jump in.
All right, Ned?
I just had a little question on that. When we're calling for the epoxy coating, because we use, at DOT, we use a lot of epoxy-coated rebar, and that's a pretty thick coating. Are we talking more about like a penetrating sealer over the concrete because we're just looking to seal it? Or did you want, I think we should clarify what we're looking for. Because normally on pier caps and other things like that, we have a penetrating sealer that does a good job of keeping any kind of oil and water that comes through the leaking joints, and it protects the top of the pier cap. But when I hear epoxy coated, I think of something that's much thicker. And it also isn't as durable as a penetrating sealer.
I mean, you sound like you have more experience in this area than I do, so I'm willing to listen to suggestions.
All right, I think more what we're looking for is a penetrating sealer for concrete as opposed to an epoxy.
Well, yeah, I mean, the goal is to seal the floor and, up a little bit on the sidewall of the concrete.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, that will do it, I think.
Yeah, this is, as the applicant, we would prefer that. I agree with that recommendation, penetrating sealing.
I don't have a bad feeling about that. I mean, my goal was just to at least seal this one garage area. So that was my primary concern.
And it's Tom Daly. We would have no objection to getting Shannon a product data sheet on that sealer as a condition of approval so she can see it before it goes down.
That's a good idea, thank you.
Was that it, Ned?
Yes, that's all I had.
Okay, Jay?
No, I don't have anything. I'm good. Thank you.
Guy?
I support the sealer too. Are you talking about one of those garages or all four of them?
I personally am just talking about the one close to the stormwater basin. The others are pretty far away.
Bob, so we don't get confused, because there's 4 units in each of the
Right.
4 garages. You're speaking of the entire, all 4
I'm
bays,
speaking of the entire garage.
the entire garage unit, this one
So we're
here.
looking at the southernmost garage units.
Yeah,
Yes.
so the entire, so the 4 bays of this garage unit.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Guy, for clarifying.
I don't have anything else, thanks.
Okay. Any more questions or comments on it? No. Couple things we need to do. One is determine the significance of the activity. Open to comments on it.
This is Ned Satchin. I think we're basically turning, some paved parking spaces into a garage. I don't think it's a significant activity. I think the runoff from the roof is going to be very similar to the runoff from the pavement. So I don't think it makes a big difference.
Would you care to make a motion to that effect?
I would make a motion that is not a significant operation or a structure.
Is there a
This is
second?
Jay. I'll second that.
Discussion? Comments? Concerns?
This is Emily, and I agree entirely. It's an equivalent amount of surface.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, we have a motion on the floor that this activity is not a significant activity. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, so it's not significant. What's your pleasure on the application?
Go ahead.
This is Robert.
I make a motion to approve the application as detailed with our comments.
Is there a second?
Second by Robert.
Jay again. Never mind.
I think Robert beat you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robert beat me to it. He did.
So just to clarify, the three conditions I think are the seal coating on the garage floor, the gravel area that Mr. Fox was talking about, and then also putting silt sock in lieu of silt fence. I believe that's all we discussed, right, Shannon?
Correct. In the agenda review, there also was the item about limiting the materials stored in the garage so that there's not hazardous material stored in the garage.
That would seem to be,
Yeah, I mean, we can include that. My understanding, based on conversations last meeting, is this may be used more for excess storage, kayak, boats, things of that nature, not necessarily vehicles, but it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have it. So those are the
It's
conditions.
Ned's motion.
Are you looking for that restriction on all the units or just the one that's closest to the stormwater? The upland from wetlands? I mean, I look at it that this is just these are parking lots for the people. I mean, there's nobody living here that's gonna have their lawnmower there, because I'm sure that it's all professionally landscaped, and it's, you know, the car has, you know, a car has more detrimental oil and gasoline in it than what most people might store there. So if we're gonna allow cars in it, then I don't know what other restriction we're gonna put on it.
That's fine. If we're good with the penetrating seal, I just wanted to make sure it didn't get missed because it was on the agenda review and it wasn't discussed, so that's all.
Well, I don't know, I'm not opposed to it, I'm just not sure what kind of restrictions we're putting on. If we're gonna allow a car in there that has gasoline and oil in it and other fluids.
I mean, I'm bringing it up because somebody last time thought it was important.
I'm perplexed by it, frankly, and if someone can explain to me in great detail why that's a necessary addition, I would love that. But right now, I don't get it.
Well, somebody, you don't want to storing a 10-gallon gas tank, you know, stuff like that.
I mean, there's already a 12-gallon gas tank in the car. And if I sound like
I think we're talking about right. I think we're talking about additional storage, and we have had prior applications with garages and other buildings in close proximity to wetlands that we have included conditions, and these are commercial settings, to limit the types of material stored in the garage. So granted, a car has oil, gas, transmission fluid, those things, but I think we're talking about excess quantities of hazardous materials.
Well, I suppose you can make the argument that if somebody's storing gasoline in a gas can, it's much easier for it to be tipped over and fall out, as opposed to, it's pretty hard for you to get your gas out of your car. I don't know what else. I guess, you know, if people have snowmobiles or something, you know, or a motorcycle, they might have oil in the garage. I guess it depends on how, you know, how people feel, you know, what we think the use is going to be. I mean, I don't know what the...
Well, some people use a garage for maintenance of their vehicles or their equipment.
Well, that's true too.
They could end up storing, you know, all their paint that they painted their unit with, any excess materials, or from their rental unit.
I don't think it's, an insurmountable thing one way or the other. I didn't mean to derail
I
the
don't
conversation.
either. I don't either.
So, at the end of the day, it's 4 units, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we've had bigger concerns in the past is when it's been maybe like a mechanical garage for
Yeah, we put those
commercial
restrictions.
facility.
Yeah,
Okay.
And
If
they're
it's not
storing
appropriate
equipment
now,
there
that's
that needs
fine.
repairs.
That's
I'm-
fine.
I'm thinking we did that on the Trump maintenance building, but they were actually having maintenance equipment in that facility. And we wanted to put some restrictions on that.
Correct.
I don't have any heartburn if we leave this off,
That's fine.
but I don't know how everybody else feels. So what is the general feeling about taking off the storage of hazardous materials? Is it yay, nay?
This is Rich. I don't have a problem with it.
Robert?
This is Robert. I would prefer to keep it in.
Okay. Emily?
I don't see the need, but if everybody wants it, that's fine.
Dave?
Yeah, I think I would lean towards keeping it in also. I thought last time the applicant indicated they didn't have a problem with it. That's still true?
Yes, our intention is that individuals will store their vehicles and other, ancillary personal items, not to include any sort of hazardous materials. So if we need to restrict that in the license or lease agreements for these garages, then I'm fine with that.
Okay. Then I'm fine with it. I'm fine with leaving it in if the majority thinks that we should leave it in.
Okay, I mean, it's starting to sound like maybe we should just leave it in, and then that may be language that the property owner can work into their lease agreements.
Yep.
Okay.
This is Jay. That sounds reasonable to me too.
Guy?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Looks like there are 4 conditions. Is there any other comments, questions? Hearing none, those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, show cause hearing, 1179 Farmington Avenue.
Good evening. This is William Galsky, the attorney for the property owner. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Since the last meeting, as you might recall, George Logan, the soil scientist, had just gotten out there prior to the last meeting, and he'll speak for most of the evening tonight about his findings. Although I think it wasn't discussed at the last meeting, a second cease and desist order was issued by Bruce Sear, more along the planning lines, planning jurisdiction of the town. So we're addressing that. And as was noticed in your agenda items last Friday, we received a notice of violation from the Army Corps of Engineers. So we've got to get a response out for that as well. Unless you have any specific questions of me, I'll probably just likely turn it over to George at this point.
Okay, this is George Logan. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, Shannon, is there any possibility you can let me share my screen, which I can request right now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. I'm going to turn something off that's making noise. So I think you need to let me come in.
Well, you're there, George. I don't know.
So when I press share screen, I get host disabled, participant screen sharing, so you have to allow me.
Right, but other than make host, make co-host.
Yeah, you might have to do that.
George Logan, co-host. Sure.
Ha!
There you go, George, you're a co-host. I wonder if I have to stop sharing my screen?
There you go. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen.
There you go.
You should see me climbing a mountain here.
Yep.
All right, so that's I guess good. So what I want to do is a number of things. First, I want to kind of discuss what we've done so far and some of the preliminary conclusions that we've come to. We're still in process of getting mapping together. Survey has been done. Maps are being generated. But I wanted to kind of do a pictorial. Pictures usually are good. Moving through the 3 dates out of the 4 that we've been out there. Also, we've been out there here today, but I'm not ready to discuss that yet. We were out there on June 13th, sort of to get a preliminary flavor of what was going on there. I think it was a Saturday. And then we were out on the 17th and the 18th, which is the time that we did the soil investigation and delineated the wetland. So I'm going to share my screen now, and can you all see this? So this is the pond. I got to move this little thing over this way so I can, and this is the pond outlet. Remember, I think Shannon had mentioned that some of you folks have gone out there and seen the pond outlet, and you can see that the pond outlet, and this is the pond, of course, on the southern portion of the site that was excavated. And then just I'm at the outlet looking down river in the Farmington River. Beautiful day, can't complain. There were people swimming. Going back to the area that we're all concerned of, which is the area that we're delineating out as a wetland, gives you an idea. Now, I did not apparently take pictures the first day that I was out there, which was sometime in May, I believe, or maybe early June, where there was actually a few inches of water here. But it's apparent that there are areas within the unaffected part of the wetland, which is really a watercourse, and I'll explain that, that ponds a few inches of water. Here's another view. And you can see from the roots and the fact that there's no vegetation growing here that this gets inundated. The plant that I'm pointing to right here, that's soft stem bulrush. It likes its feet wet. It's an obligate species. Coming out of those areas, there are several patches, and this is one of them where you have a proliferation of wetland vegetation. Here you got fox sedge, a bunch of other sedges. We'll give you a list of what we found at some point. And then moving out of sort of the shrub area of the wetland, and of course now I'm looking southerly towards the pond. The pond is on the other side of those trees. You can see there's this open area, and it's not all wetland. What's obviously proximal to where I'm sitting taking this picture is wetland, and then you see the flowering bush, which is a multiflora rose. Past that, it's not a wetland any longer, but it's a moist meadow, if you will. Here's another view of an area that we would call a regulated resource. Now, remember I showed you that there was this sort of a hedgerow of trees, and I said beyond that was the pond. Well, next to the pond, so just to the north of the pond, there's a series of berms, and some of these berms are up to 15 feet higher than the actual level of the pond. And here I am sitting probably 10 or 12 feet above the pond, looking towards the pond in a sort of a southerly, southwesterly direction. And then if I turn around and look the other way, this is what I see. And some of that is wetland. and was mapped as wetland. Dominant tree that you see there is cottonwoods, which apparently like these disturbed areas. Apart from the one wetland that we delineated and mapped, there are little patches of wetland here and there. And this is a little Phragmites patch. It's probably 30 by 20. And there's several of those, some with Phragmites, some without Phragmites, that are scattered throughout that area. Here is before we dug our trenches. Again, this is on the 13th of June. I'm looking westerly, and this is the area that we will eventually do our trenches to show where the wetland used to be, or the regulated resource. And then what I'm going to show you is we had 7 trenches, and Shannon has looked at those, some of them with me. And what's notable here is, see if I can point, so to about, if you see my cursor, to about here, so from there to there, this is your recent fill, and that's however many inches, let's call it 17 or so. I can't read that number very well. Let's see, maybe I can read it. Yeah, I was close, 19 inches. So we got 19 inches of fill, and as you can see, the fill is actually almost like topsoil fill. It's a loamy, fine sand. It's more of a topsoil than not. And this fill came from those large, taller berms up to 30 feet tall that are on the northern property boundary. And what you see under that, this little layer right here, this is sort of an example, is what looks like some roots and some organic material. And then below that, you see other layers of past filling that's happened over the years. And I'll show you the aerial photographs, and you can see that. So that was test pit, or test trench, if you will, 2. 1, this is 2. Again, here you see the organics, lesser fill. This is probably closer to the edge of the clearing. Here's another one. This is test trench number 3. Some are pretty deep. None of them except one actually had water, and you'll probably see, I'll explain when that is. This is test trench 4. Now, one of the things that I did as I was doing these trenches and looking, I went into the undisturbed portion of what we actually ended up mapping as a wetland. And I think Shannon, I showed her some of that. And what I did is I dug a hole, went down to 20 inches, which is typically what we do as soil scientists, and looked at the underlying strata. And what you can see here that's striking, even though you do see some reduxomorphic features, that's a little modeling, etc. Let me focus a little bit. You know, you can see some discoloration. Here's a high chroma model. Here's a little lower area. But if you look at the overall matrix, it's high chroma, which means that it wouldn't typically qualify as a wetland soil. Here's a pedon, so part of that same thing. And you can see the chroma. The background is pretty light, chroma 3 or 4 most likely. So again, it doesn't qualify as a profile that would be a wetland profile. Back to the trenches, this is trench number 5. And again, back into the undisturbed mapped portion of the wetland / watercourse, again down to 20 inches. Back out to trench number 6. And you can see here, the fill is actually where that flag is up here. You can see it, that's why I've extended all the way to here. I think the guy who was digging the holes was a little concerned that I was going to, you know, this was going to cave in. I was going to be in harm's way, but I wasn't really. It was fine. So this is from here to here is the actual fill. This is the layer that I was distinguishing as having some wetland characteristics, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then underneath are soil layers. Some of them are pretty dense. There's some silty clay loams, some silt loams that perch water down deep. And here's, I think this is from trench 6, looking back towards the undisturbed mapped wetland, and you can see some of the kinds of materials that had been placed here prior to the more recent fill, if you will. So here's the recent fill, and this is the previous where things were, and here's the, we found bituminous, we found concrete, we found rocks and gravel, we found obviously bricks here, several kinds of things, and all this will be logged and in a report at some point. And this finally is our last test pit, test trench, and past that, the wetland boundary went back into the vegetated portion. So that's what happened on the 17th. I'm back here on the 18th, and I look, this is, I think, our first trench, maybe our second, and I'm looking all the way down to the last one. And what you will see here, I'll point it out, is this little flag, based on my characterization of what was going in this pit, whichever it was, 304. Wait a minute. This is, does that say 1 over here? Could be. So I might be at 1, that might be 2, and this will be my wetland flag that I'm looking at. So that's the, I think that's the last one that I have. I thought I had some more. Apparently not. Any rate, so that gives you an idea of what we saw. Now what I'd like to see is kind of give you some aerial photographs that are historic, that kind of give you a little picture of what's happened here. I think you probably all know what's happened, but this is 1934. Where's the site? Probably around here. This might be close to the northern property boundary. Maybe it's over here. We'll see. Note the little curvature of Farmington Avenue. That did not change. You can see some ditching here, some obviously wetlands down in this area, some old meanders of the Farmington River, and here, and of course the Farmington River. So then we go to the next one. That's the 1951. Again, our site that we're talking about is roughly in this area. You can note that the Farmington River bank is still intact. You'll see why I'm saying that. And then we can go to the 19, by the way, this is with trees. This is a summer picture. All the 1951s, for the most part, are. And then we get to 1965. Not as good a resolution picture. I think I can get a better one. But what you see is some things have happened, and lo and behold, since the early 60s, late 50s, the Farmington River has been basically mined out. So here's where the channel must have been, and now we have all this, and this is the beginning of the operation. And I think now you might be seeing more clearly that this is probably about where the northern property boundary is, and you'll see it in subsequent photos. So that's the 1965. Now, 1975 years or so go by. Now you can see the northern property boundary a lot clearly. And this is where the berm will be situated, that has been in part taken out to produce the fill that's going to be here. You can see the pond is starting to be formed, and the excavation continues. Going now to the 1986, couldn't find the 70 online, I'm sorry, the 75 or the 80. You have to go to the state library and wear the white gloves to do that. But this is 86, which is instructive. I mean, this is under full-blown operation at this point. Here's your northern property boundary and your berm that's being formed. Basically what happened is, you know, this being a farm before, they stripped the topsoil and kind of piled it up here, you know, to be used in a later point. The pond is probably at its greatest extent. Might have been a little bigger if we had the 80 picture or the 75, but you get the idea. Now, keep an eye on this, and now we're going to go to the 90, and you'll see that they're starting to fill the pond a little bit. Here's the 1990, and then the 95 will be very instructive. So if you look back here, You can see how this area is part of the pond. And now you go to the 1995 and it's no longer part of the pond, and portions of the pond have been filled in. And what's interesting here is that, again, the northern berm, and this is the area that we're talking about where a wetland has formed. And under this 1995 aerial photograph, which probably is pretty much where the pond edge is now, plus or minus a little bit, you can see this is a storage area for probably construction equipment, construction material, some trailers, obviously, other things. So that's 1995, and then the 2004 is the last one that I'm going to show you, because not too many years after that, earth moving stuff stopped. Now, this is the area, so you can see a haul road, and the haul road is basically the edge of where some vegetation that had grown back was basically stripped, and this fill was placed roughly in this particular area. So if I went here and did a little polygon, I would say that the area of the fill is, well, there's some down this way, obviously, but it's basically something like that. And so the area that that I mapped that's still vegetated as a wetland is in this area, and it's, I'm not sure if what this shows us, but when we went down 24 to 36 inches on average, we hit that silty clay loam, which is pretty dense, and no water there. I think the water is even further down than that. So this is kind of one of the reasons why we have a wetland, which is kind of a man-made wetland. So let me go and show you the last little picture so you can kind of see what I did. What this shows you is the pond. These more mature trees are, as you can see from the shadows, are berm. This is a berm that's 12, 15 feet tall. We'll see that in a topographic map at some point when we finally generate that. So what I did is I decided to map the edge of the regulated resource, this particular one. And as I said, there are a few other little patches here and there, but this is a contiguous one. That's the biggest one. Here, and I think this is a 2019 or maybe 18 aerial photograph. So this is where the haul road used to be that I pointed to earlier. And you can see that there is some vegetation has come in, a lot of shrubby, some saplings probably that was cleared. And this point where I started is my last flag, because what I did is I went into the woods, if you will, into the sapling thicket and mapped the apparent area of the regulated resource. And then what did I do? Well, here's the interesting part of it. If you look at this area and look at the soils, you might say maybe 10 to 15% of it has soils that we could qualify as poorly drained. The rest of it does not. However, under the Connecticut state statute, in situations like this, where these, this is a disturbed area, man-made, you can look at the vegetative community, and if you can define it as a marsh or a swamp or a bog, or not, we don't do that very often as far as bogs, but then you can call it a watercourse. It falls under the watercourse definition, not an intermittent watercourse, but a watercourse under the definition, and you can look at it in the regulations that define it based on a vegetative community. So what I did is I looked at the apparent hydrology, and I looked at preponderance of wetland vegetation. It had to be better than 50%, so I could call it preponderance. And I basically used my phone GPS with this utility. It's a plus or minus 11 feet accuracy. In this open area, it hits that, and followed it. And you can see I followed it kind of, and then I hit the berm, so I kind of followed the berm. And then I turned around and went back and hit my last flag, and obviously the trenches are all in this area. And you'll see that when we finally generate the map, which we're reviewing right now. What's interesting is that this doesn't go all the way to the pond. Um, what's going to be interesting when you finally see the topo is, and I was kind of amazed, is what I followed in the blue line more or less follows a topographic elevation, which was kind of interesting. Kind of verified that what I was not crazy, I guess. But this is isolated. It doesn't run off. You know, this slopes down all the way to the pond, but there's no apparent area where when this, say in a wet year, in the springtime, will actually overflow. It has a foot or two of capacity. It's slightly depressional, which is why it's become a wetland. And the interesting part of it is that for the most part, except for a few sumps where the topsoil is maybe 3 or 4 inches, in most of this area, the topsoil that's developed is 1 or 2 inches. And so we look at that, we see the wetland vegetation, we see the apparent hydrology, inundation, and that's what we end up calling this a watercourse more than a wetland, but it's still obviously regulated. So why am I saying this? Because one of the things that we've been asked to do is to respond to the notice of violation to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I know it's not really your jurisdiction, but you were copied on the notice of violation, and when we send our letter to respond, we will copy you folks back so you can see that there is communication. But basically what we're going to be telling the Army Corps of Engineers is they have no jurisdiction over this area because it's isolated and it's not physically or hydrologically connected to waters of the United States. So it's our contention that they have no jurisdiction. But we'll see. They might have other ideas, but at least that's our opinion at that point. What else I can tell you from going back, looking at our trenches. What I did notice, and you know, we discussed this with Shannon a little bit in the field, in looking at the stratification within the trenches of pass fill in particular, I did not find any evidence whatsoever of any influence by floodwaters. So these are not, even the strata below don't show that these were flooded, meaning they're not alluvial soils at any point, whether they were there before, indigenous or not. So even the lowest strata that I was able to see, which is probably quite far down, probably 170, maybe even further down than that elevation, there's no evidence that floodwaters ever touch it. And I think part of the reason for that is because the operator at that time, this is before obviously Plant 117 LLC, had made sure that this was isolated, that the berms that I showed you, in which we will show you the topography, did not allow for floodwaters from the Farmington River to come up through the pond. By the way, the pond is several feet above the level of the Farmington River. We'll call it 3 or 4, maybe more. So that was, and you look at the old aerial photographs, the other thing you notice that this connection of the pond to the Farmington River is relatively new. That, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, when this operation was still, you know, winding down but still there, that the pond was purposely isolated from the Farmington River, which kind of made sense because it was like a humongous sedimentation or siltation pond. Obviously, they didn't want fines to go into the Farmington River, so they had isolated it. But that's not the case, obviously, anymore. So that's kind of where I'm at this point. The other thing that we're trying to do now that I've done most of this work is to find areas which will kind of make sense where mitigation could take place. There's several things we're thinking about. One of the things we're thinking about, there's some areas that are proximal to the pond where we can carefully annex to the pond and create an area of contiguous wetland, contiguous to the pond, that will be a lot more highly functioning and more resilient than the wetland or the watercourse that we're looking at here. Now, certainly, if I was able to look back, and I'm just speculating a little bit here, but if I was able to look back, say, past 2004 up to, say, 2012 or 14 or 15, I probably would not be able to characterize anything that's regulated in here, because this watercourse / wetland was being developed. You know, as organics were accumulated, it would seal it. And so you have a dual perch water table. One is down, as I said, 24, 36 inches. And that fills up with water. When there's surplus water, probably comes all the way to the surface and wets that area that is within the blue lines. And then you have, over the years, created this other little perch situation of these organics that are being laid down year after year as you know, as leaves fall down and detritus falls down and there's decay and there's organics that incorporate in those top few inches. So that's what's kind of been going. And, you know, this might become wetter as the time goes by, but I'm not sure it's ever going to look like a real wetland per soil type. That's going to take many, many decades from now. And of course, the danger that we have here is that if we let it go to its own, it's just going to be a grove of cottonwood, probably some willows, little patches of this and that here and there. And then, of course, the fear is Phragmites, because where you see my cursor, the Phragmites within this mapped resources in this particular area. So that could expand, hopefully not much because you got dense vegetation. So there could be a management recommendation that could be had here as part of our mitigation plan, which we're still working on, that would preserve this, because it does have, you know, it's a mosaic. It's got some good diversity. I did notice a lot of wildlife, but I might have been there in the wrong time of the day, most likely. And if you have a pond and a river, guess where the wildlife is going to go? So that's kind of where I'm at this point, sort of give you an idea. There will be a report. There will be logs. There will be all these pictures that you see here, so you can peruse them at your own leisure. And we can go from there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have.
I guess we'll start with Rich.
I don't have any questions at this point.
Just trying to digest everything.
Yeah.
Emily?
No questions, just a lot of information. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dave?
Nothing at this time.
Robert?
George, thanks for the overview. That was very helpful. It was very comprehensive.
You're welcome.
You identified that you're going to be coalescing all this into a report. What's your tentative timeframe on when you think that would be available for the commission and staff?
So my plan for this week is to respond to the Army Corps of Engineers, because they gave us a very narrow window for response. It was 15 days from, I want to say June 22nd or 21st, I don't remember. So we have to respond this week, so that's my effort. And I'll be able to generate some of the same aerial photographs and annotate them so they're a little more clear. So that will be ready. The next thing I need to do is probably go out back in the field and look at a couple of areas that I'm looking for potential mitigation, meaning creation of wetlands, so that I can at least present a, say, conceptual plan, so we can have some discussion. So that's going to be next week. And so I'm hoping by the beginning of the following week, that I will have a report. So I think you're meeting in 2 weeks again, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So let's see if I can get you something by that previous Friday or at the latest Monday that's comprehensive enough, even if the mitigation part is still conceptual and we have to kind of work through a few things. So at least what I've spoken to this evening can be documented and be part of the record in a part of a report. So that will be what I would hope to do.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Ned?
Yeah, George, I'm sorry, I was having trouble following what you were trying to show with the slide with the blue line that was going through. What were the limits you were trying to show with that? Yeah, that.
Okay. So let's see if I can make it a little more clear. Let's see. So this is the area where we looked at the trenches. So I did a delineation, and I'm going to just mark something. It's not going to be exact. That looked something like this. All right. So the fill, if you will, is right at the edge of the fill is right here where the old Hall Road was. And so the trenches are out here. And so we have, I think we calculated this point, plus or minus 6,000 square feet of conservatively a regulated area that was impacted. And again, my delineation was conservative. I had to be conservative. I'd rather be a little conservative than not in this particular case. Because obviously I'm looking at soils and fine layers of vegetation. So when we did this, and this has been surveyed by conventional survey, and you'll see that on the plan, I wanted to get an idea of what this contiguous area, this whole contiguous wetland looked like. So that's where when I went, used my little GPS and kind of walked the edge of it all the way down here and back again. So this was the last flag on this side that I put. So I started at, well, I have A1 through.
Excuse me. Just so I understand now, you're saying that from as you view it in the field, you viewed that as the edge of the wetland, and then you were just allowing your phone to follow your course with the blue line.
Correct. So
What you see in the field.
So I have a GPS in my phone, and it has a utility that throws out a map. This is the particular aerial that I chose, which is Google, as you can see in the bottom. So that followed my track as I walked the edge of what looked, based on apparent hydrology, preponderance of wetland vegetation, to be a watercourse under what I'm saying. Because as I said, the soils throughout here do not make much sense. Only a very small proportion would be classified as poorly drained. But that doesn't matter. You can map a regulated area based on what it looks like as far as a vegetative community. So everything within the blue line, the darker blue line here, and this other line that I just put in here is the wetland that we're talking about.
Okay, I understand. I wasn't sure how that line was created. Now I understand that you just created it by walking the course and viewing the area around you and your best judgment as to where the wetland limits were.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. So let's see, I'll give you another.
That's all I have.
So here's another view. This is on the 13th, what I walked. There was someone else with me, they walked something else. So I had my GPS follow me. See, I went all the way to where the pond outlets, and then it just followed me around as I went around, and at the end I said, okay, save the track. So here it is, so I can have it. So I did something similar for the edge of the wetland.
Okay, Jay?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm just going to say that this is a lot for me to comprehend, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's in the report, because that's going to really kind of help me understand what's going on a little bit better than I do, but I don't have any questions. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Guy?
No questions, thanks.
George, I think the one question I have
Mm-hmm.
is when we walked the site, we walked east on the site until we got to a point where it looked like there were a lot of dump trucks just dropping material. It was not leveled, it was not compressed. Did you look in that area at all, or were you staying primarily on the compacted fill area?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and Shannon might remember that we discussed this in the field. So if you looked at my last flag here, A6, so A1 is somewhere up here, and A6 is somewhere here. Past here is where the piles that you talked about, but there's an area where they stripped what was there before, and they hadn't filled it, so it's open. And the soils throughout here were apparent, so that I could say whatever this is isolated from anything else back here. And obviously there are piles out there. It's kind of difficult to navigate through, but you might remember that there is actually a plan that was produced by BL, when they did the Mormon Tabernacle, the Mormon Temple, and they had defined somewhere past my cursor down in this area, I think it was 5 isolated man-made little wetlands. So those are probably covered under those piles. And if you look at the topography, it kind of makes sense. The topography that we have, looking at the state topography 2016, that's online, the GIS. So we're going to take those into account. So if we have, say, 6,000 square feet plus or minus of wetland that has conservatively been impacted here, and then we have another 1,000 to 2,000 square feet of isolated wetlands here, well, then whatever mitigation we end up with is going to have to, it'd be at least a 2-to-1 and offset all the functions that have been lost by this and then some.
Okay, and then I guess a general question. I'm not looking for an answer at this particular point in time, but with the site the way it is, and you've also got the pond out there. You may have some other isolated wetlands. You have this area that you're referring to, I think actually as a water course rather than a wetland.
Correct.
But I guess my question is, in laying out some of the maps, if you're identifying where the wetland delineation is and then the 150-foot setback from that, I don't know if you've thought about doing that yet, but that may be something we need to look at.
Sure. You said 150 feet, is that what I heard?
Well, that's what we have in town for the regulated area upland of the wetlands.
Yeah, I think I saw that in the previous application. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, so that's something that I would be very curious about.
Sure, that should be easy enough. I mean, we know where the northern portion of the wetland boundary is, and that's obviously the critical one. And then we'll look at the little isolated ones and see what we do with those.
All right. Shannon, what's your take so far?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. Somebody is not muted and they're moving a bunch of papers and it's coming through like you're playing drums right next to your phone. So if you could just mute your phone if you're not talking would be helpful. And then I do, because I'm also seeing this for the first time. George, I have a question. I know you've talked about Mitigation, which I think obviously is prudent here. When you use the term mitigation, are you also including restoration of these areas that have been filled, and that's your intent that some of this area will be restored too?
That's a discussion that we're having right now, and I find it a little difficult to propose restoration here because of how transitional this wetland that was impacted is. And so it'd be very difficult for me to recreate a wetland in this, or restore a wetland or recreate a wetland without doing some pretty fancy stuff, which will probably not guarantee success. Because again, this is a perched, for the most part, a perched hydrology, and be very, very difficult to recreate that based on, you saw the soils out there. I mean, what do I do? Do I dig down 3 feet down to that impervious surface and create a pond? But that's not replacing the functions and, that were out there. So I'd rather find an area that's going to have a stable hydrology that maybe taps into the subregional water table close to the pond, which then it's contiguous with the pond, which obviously then, because of its association, juxtaposition with the pond, both the pond becomes more valuable and the wetland that we're creating becomes more valuable.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I think that's probably something that's going to, I think you're going to want to articulate very clearly your thought process on that when it comes time to presenting
Sure.
that information and explaining why this area wouldn't be restored, or to what level it would be restored and some of this material removed. So
Yep, that makes sense.
okay.
I mean, I can certainly see something happening there because you got a cut. I just don't know that it would be easy, if at all possible, to create a 6,000 square foot area where it was there before. But we could look at that. We can look at alternatives.
And if your professional judgment on this obviously has weight, but I think many times the commission's looking at a restoration, so I think being able to articulate why that perhaps isn't a best course of action is, you're going to want to be able to clearly articulate that. So,
Absolutely.
if that's not being done, and then we'll have to understand what is being done with that area moving ahead.
Sure.
Because there's also knotweed there, as we've talked about. So there is some work that's going to have to be done there. We're not leaving it as is.
Correct. And that's, I'll probably have a little discussion about that, but it's probably in the future, once we look at the restoration, mitigation, whatever we end up doing, that's going to have to be addressed, because if it isn't, then it's going to affect what we're doing.
Right. Okay. And I know you had said, so there's the hydraulic connectivity to the pond doesn't appear to be there between the wetland and the pond.
Correct.
So your colleague had walked with you and was looking for biological and habitat-related things that may be of concern. Is there any information you have to share?
No, she went out there today again. I haven't talked to her. Actually, that little ding ding that you were hearing in the background was her texting me. I haven't looked at it.
Sure. No, that's fair. That's fair. I know there's a lot of ground to cover out here and a lot of things to look at. So that's fair. I just wanted to.
Yeah, we only spent about 2.5, 3 hours the first time we were there, and there's a lot more to look at.
Sure. Okay. That's all I had, Bob. So.
Okay. Any other questions from any of the other commissioners? So it sounds like we may be getting something like a week and a half down the road. Did I hear you correctly on that, George?
Yes, that's my hope. I think I see the light at the end of the tunnel of what I need to do. So now I can all put it all together.
All right, the one thing that I would ask that you do, though, is keep in touch with Shannon so that she's got a clear understanding of
Sure.
where you are in the process.
Yeah, and that's something that I've tried to do all along.
That's appreciated.
Of course.
So I guess that's it for the time being here.
I think so. Bill, do you have anything else to add?
I do not, no.
Okay. So we'll,
Thank you for the information.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. I'm going to stop sharing, so give you back the
Perfect.
screen. Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, pleasure talking with all of you, and we'll reconvene in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Take care.
I don't need this one.
Next item on the agenda, show cause hearing 19 Canterbury Lane.
Okay.
Good evening.
Ian is there?
I am here. I am here. For the record, named Ian Cole, soil scientist. I'm here tonight with, I believe Ellen is on the phone as well. And we're here on the matter of resolving the cease and desist order for conduct of a regulated activity without a permit at 19 Canterbury Lane. So on behalf of Ellen and in quick response to the town's notification of the cease and desist, I was retained to visit the property and discuss the existing conditions of the vegetation removal that occurred in the wetland in the rear of the property at Canterbury Lane. By way of background and context and discussions with Ellen, in the past, they have had conflicts with nuisance wildlife. They've had instances with flying squirrels and bats. And then in addition, there were notable danger and hazard trees adjacent to the house. So Ellen, because of the dead trees, had hired a professional arborist, Arbor Care Solutions, who came to the house and assessed the trees and had noted and suggested the removal of 2 danger trees and 1 hazard tree in the rear of the house immediately adjacent to the house. So in the vegetation management world, danger trees, just by way of background, are basically trees that are inevitable are going to fail and are posing an immediate threat. And a hazard tree is a tree that is damaged or diseased or is for various environmental reasons at a high risk of failure. And both the categories of danger and hazard trees typically pose an immediate threat to property and or public safety. So, you know, because of these unavoidable conflicts, the trees were removed. The activity was kind of limited to just where the tree removal was. Specifically, there were 2 dead hemlock trees that were taken down and 1 maple tree that was noted as having significant woodpecker damage and was also leaning in the direction of the residents. So with the condition of those trees, they were removed. Other activities that occurred within the wetland boundary associated with those tree removals were limited to the canopy footprint. Basically, the arborist crew, after they felled the hemlocks, they removed those stumps and cleared the associated understory, forested understory there, and then used the on-site wetland soils in the immediate area to kind of backfill the holes of the 2 hemlock stumps. You know, that pretty much was the limit of the ground disturbance, so to speak. So in my opinion, in looking at the conditions there, they didn't disturb the area in a meaningful, long-term, impactful way that would increase runoff or compaction. There was really no significant grade changes or alterations to the drainage patterns. They simply backfilled in those 2 holes left behind from the hemlock stumps. You know, I think it's noteworthy that the site is currently stabilized. We're in a level kind of topography area, and during my inspection on June 23rd, ground conditions were dry, and so, you know, more or less at the moment, I would consider the site stabilized from an erosion hazard perspective. So in looking at this, I was fortunate enough to, Ellen had the arborist on site when I was there to discuss the activities that happened and how they could go about fixing it. I think, though, before we get into the restoration activity that's seen on the screen here, we have my report to the commission, and we can kind of look at figure 1 here on page 4 of 6. And in here you can see the addition that was approved in 2005 comes very close to the wetland boundary, within 10 feet. And here on the aerial bird's eye view, we can kind of see, you know, there's some dead trees. And also, having doing delineations in the area, I've noted hemlocks in this area are experiencing the unfortunate problematic woody adelgid, you know, parasite that is negatively affecting all of our hemlock species in the region. So that may be the cause of why the hemlocks were dead. And obviously the maple was had taken significant woodpecker damage, and woodpeckers can certainly do some amazing things to trees. So in discussions with the crew and Ellen, you know, my recommendations for restoring this area, on page 2, I lay that out in 10 items. You know, I'd be happy to go through them, but essentially the big picture of it is, you know, we discussed with the crew that they are absolutely not allowed to drive any type of equipment into a wetland, that the act of doing so constitutes a discharge of fill with any kind of running that could be left behind. Fortunately, the machinery that was used back there was a low impact machine. It was basically, you know, the small rubber tracked excavator type machine with a claw on it. You can see on, as what's on the screen right now is a good picture. So what's left on the site currently, we have that yellow dashed line. That's the approximate wetland boundary. It's identifiable by a break in the slope that's pretty distinct, and you can see it's pretty close to what we see there. The house, that's the addition that was put in 2005. So what's left on the site right now is we have that debris pile. That is the 2 stumps that were excavated from the hemlock, and you know, some associated slash and vines, and then you can see kind of to the left of the picture, there's the existing maple stump, and then the logs left behind. So as discussed with the crew, you know, we said no machinery shall be driven into the wetlands at all. If machinery is used to remove those logs, I recommended they either cut them up and carry them out by hand, or they could cable them out using a small excavator from the upland area to limit any kind of ground disturbance and to minimize any additional vegetation that may be damaged when they're pulling that out. So they both communicated that that could happen in a fashion where there would be no additional damage. We recommend that we remove the debris pile. Basically, that debris pile will be removed from the arbor care and live loaded onto their truck and disposed of at an appropriate facility. I discussed with them that no wood chipping or other processing of the woody material could occur on site to make sure, you know, so that, you know, in the event that sometimes these things get wood chipped and redeposited in the wetlands, that would constitute a discharge of fill. We discussed removing the debris pile. To limit any additional ground disturbance, we're going to leave that stump cut maple is going to remain in place. And then to basically help the recovering wetlands here, to replace the 3 tree species that were removed, we're recommending in a 2-to-1 ratio to basically plant 6 3 to 4 foot tall shrubs that are compatible with the rest of the native shrub community that's out there, which is essentially spice bush, high bush blueberry, common winterberry, you know, the typical classic red maple forested understory that we have in our area. So those will be purchased. They're going to be spaced somewhat randomly to simulate the natural growth patterns. Once those materials are procured and or on site, you know, we'll coordinate with the planning and zoning department that the plants have arrived at site. We'll lay them out. You know, once we get the blessing that they're good where they are, they'll be installed. And then the standard, you know, 2 growing seasons of monitoring to ensure the long-term survivability of those plants will be implemented. Kind of the standard protocol of, you know, the one report due in December at each year. And so, you know, we talk about the success standards of the restoration area essentially are, you know, at the end of every year, make sure that the 6 plants are healthy and alive. And then the second standard is to ensure that no invasive species have kind of recolonized the area and have taken over. Fortunately, in this area, there are not a lot of invasive species. So I don't anticipate, you know, the likelihood that will happen here. As far as the forest floor restoration, because no fill material was brought into the site and the ground conditions throughout most of the area where the ground was cleared have largely been kind of left in place and at the same grade, the thought process is, you know, because that material is in situ, that the seed source for that existing forest floor is still within that material. And then often in these areas, the herbaceous stratum will naturally revegetate. And so what we're going to see here long-term after those native shrub plantings are in place, probably within the next growing season, you know, we'll start to see the skunk cabbage and the cinnamon fern kind of repopulate and carpet that forest floor. You know, so I guess, you know, in summary, you know, this is one of those issues that can arise when we have, you know, the unintended consequence of approved developments in very close proximity to wetlands, especially forested ones. And, you know, there's that striking that right balance between, you know, the owner's right to maintaining their property and their residents in a safe way while still preserving the ecology and the integrity of the adjacent resources. And obviously trees and wetlands have a higher susceptibility to tree throw, you know, which is a concern, you know, and that's mostly due to their shallow rooted systems and those saturated soil conditions. Also in combination with, you know, trees being along edge habitat also are more likely to blow down. So, you know, in my opinion, if the restorative plantings and the rest of the corrective actions are adopted and implemented, I do not feel that the wetlands will have this irreversible or loss of functions and values holistically. So I do not feel long-term that we're going to have a negative effect on the natural capacity of the wetlands, provided, you know, we come in here and we follow those 10 conditions and the follow-up monitoring. We should be able to reverse kind of what has happened here.
Thank you.
Rich, comments, questions?
Question, would the addition of a couple of markers help the situation at this property?
So currently there are markers along where the boundary is. In 2005, when the addition was put in as one of the orders of conditions, they did monument the wetland boundary. So there are marker signs out there on 4x4 posts.
Are the markers located in places where they're readily visible?
Yes.
And they delineate the angle points?
They, in my opinion, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Emily?
None from me, no.
David?
You indicated that there's probably a lot of seed left over in the soil and regeneration will happen. Not really an expert on this stuff, but is there some sort of like a wetland seed mixture that you can sow to help that process along?
There certainly is, and I guess that could be hand raked in. My thought process was to limit any additional unnecessary ground disturbance, and not that that's a huge ground disturbance at all, but it's certainly something that could be a condition of restoration.
I don't know how to balance those two things, but it was just a thought. That's all.
My thought on it would be, if after the first monitoring period, if the forest floor was not showing signs of substantial recovery, that would be a recommendation to deploy at that time.
That sounds like a good approach. Thank you.
Robert?
I think this is a typical case where I probably blame the tree company more than anyone else, because I guess the only thing the tree company didn't do was cut down the conservation easement markers that were visible in photos. I think the Sayud has acted responsibly in quickly responding to the town staff and bringing in Ian. And Ian, thanks for your overview and the restoration plan. I think had the Sayudas come to the town to request work in the conservation area, given the condition of the trees, the hazard and endangered trees, it would have been acceptable to do. There would have been upfront notice to not do unnecessary work and some of the ground disturbance. So I think that the work that was done was justifiable based on the condition of the trees. The sequence of the events was obviously a little off. I think the restoration plan is good. So I think having town staff oversee coordination of the restoration plan, I'd be satisfied with the proposal. That's all I have.
Ned?
Yeah, I agree with Robert. I think this is just unfortunate, there was a need to take down the trees, and I think the tree company could have used a little more finesse in taking them down and with a little less disruption. But I like Ian's plan and the ideas here, and I think David has a good point about the soil mix, that maybe we could hold off on additional seeding until after the first monitoring point, and then if it's needed to put in additional seed. But I think Ian's right that we should let whatever naturally occurs first, and if it doesn't occur naturally, then we could help it along. But I like everything I see with regard to the rehabilitation, and I do think that it was just an unintended consequences that there was a need to remove the trees, but I think just a little more damage was done than might have been planned for. But I don't have any questions.
Jay?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I would agree with what the other comments were. It sounds like they have a pretty good plan of action to try to fix this stuff. And I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Guy?
I'm concerned that this was done in violation of the notification that was there on site. And I'd like to see the monitoring go longer as a consequence. In the past, we have gone as far as 5 years of monitoring, but I think it should be longer than 2. That's all I have.
Okay. I understand the need to take down some trees that can be a hazard, whether it's damage to the house, damage to people walking by, things of that nature. Unfortunately, though, before the trees were cut down, there should have been communication with the town to get clarification as to what could be done and when it could be done. And hopefully we don't run into something like this again in the future. Because the issue is those markers are not for wetlands, but it's actually a conservation easement. And I believe the town holds the rights for that easement, Shannon?
Well, no, it's not a homeowners association. It's the Town of Farmington Conservation Easement.
Okay. So from that perspective, to do work within that area, you really need approval prior to doing the work in that area, and you need the approval from the town. I agree with Guy. I would look maybe more at a 3-year monitoring, which is what we've done in most places. And I'm a little up in the air about Dave's comment about doing some seeding. I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be done outside of seeding with, say, some type of a wetland seed mix to help stabilize the existing area. I don't know if using something like straw works. I just don't know. So I'm just throwing something like that out because it looks like from the picture that's on page 5, it looks like the downspout on the house goes underground. So I can't tell for sure if it does or if that drains directly toward that wetland area. So you get a rain like we had today, you're going to have a lot of water coming down that downspout, but I just don't know where it goes. I don't know if it's tied in with some type of a drain around the house, if it goes to a dry well, or if it just goes overland. No, because actually looking at that picture, it looks like it goes directly towards the wetlands.
It does. I think it's over there.
It does. This is Ian, for the record. I guess in response to that, I would say, obviously there is a downspout there. There are no apparent areas of historic concentrated flow or areas that I would consider, hazard for significant erosion or, really many opportunities for any kind of sediment migration to make it down into that wetland. I did also note, there were what I would believe is the footing drain for surrounding the addition of that house does, daylight, in close proximity to the conservation easement. Again, on my visit there was no observable flow in either of these areas. And, being that this is an area that's kind of on the transition and on the fringe of the wetland boundary, it's not extremely wet in there, so to speak. You have to go into the wetlands another 100 feet before you get surface water this time of year.
Okay. Yeah, I can't tell, and the ground is pretty roughed up, so I just wanted to make sure, even by for a year or this growing season, and doing anything until maybe next year, if things do not restore. I just wanted to make sure that we don't have erosion problems this year.
So I don't believe we will. So I don't know everybody's experience on the commission with being on any kind of more larger scale forestry projects, but they're always very raw at first sight. And so, these pictures were taken, very recently after this activity just occurred. Yep. So to the credit of Ellen, she got the notice, immediately stopped. So one of the reasons these pictures are kind of, show all these activities are because they did stop and they didn't continue to remove all the materials and clean it up. And clearly, being this type of neighborhood, they want to restore the area so that it doesn't look like this, so that it's, there'll be a mutual benefit to enhancing the wetlands from the fact that it will be much more aesthetically pleasing. Ian,
would having hay down just from I guess to to keep from tracking in that area as well. So it's a visual barrier as well as an opportunity to allow native seeds to oxygen.
My thought is by putting, initially I thought, does this need any ENS control? And my initial thoughts are, what would the ENS control serve? There's already markers out there. You have that distinct toe of slope wetland boundary, so it is definable already. And I think there's really no opportunities upslope to introduce any kind of hazards where I'd be concerned. But certainly, if it pleases the commission, a line of straw wattles or something like that would, be very easy to implement. I just don't necessarily see the benefit of that.
I was actually thinking of breaking apart a hay bale and taking that material.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking that was my comment too.
Casting it like you would on fresh grass seed, casting it over
now
entire
I'm
planting
understanding
area.
what you're. Sorry for the disconnect in what you were asking for. Certainly that would not hurt the situation. It not necessarily a common practice, but it is, in landscaping, more, developed features. Certainly could do it. I don't think it would have any negative consequence or, impede the success of that forest floor coming back up.
Okay. That might be an easy compromise.
Sure.
I mean, that's where I was going with it. I mean, I thought that might be an easy way. At least it protects the soil to a degree.
Yep.
And then see what comes up in the spring.
Yeah, we could list that as the 11th condition, certainly.
Okay.
So what is it we need to do here, Shannon?
Well, a vote to approve the restoration plan and let them move ahead, I suppose, if there's nothing else at this point. So we'd approve the restoration plan as presented, and that would allow, then I can issue an email tomorrow giving them permission to move ahead, because right now there's a cease and desist order, so they're not to do anything until.
Yeah, and my take is the sooner the plants go in, the better off we are, because August tends to be kind of dry, but this year we'll probably get about 17 inches of rain.
Hey, you know what? We haven't had any the last 6 weeks, and we're going to get it all today, so.
Yep. That's my point.
Yep.
This is Ian. I would agree the sooner the better, and I know Ellen is looking to get this area restored as quickly as possible.
So would one of the commission members care to make a motion?
This is Jay. I'll make a motion to approve the restoration plan as delineated in the presentation, I guess.
Excuse me.
Any conditions associated with that?
This is statute. I would add in our distribute the straw, as the 11th topic, as the 11th requirement.
And the monitoring for 3 years.
Monitoring for 3 years.
Yeah, monitor for 3 years.
Is that acceptable, Jay?
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, comments, questions? Hearing none, those in favor of the proposed restoration plan with the attached conditions, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ian and Ellen. I appreciate you getting on the call.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.
You too.
All righty.
Planners report.
Yeah, there's just a handful of things. I'm trying to.
5 out of 6 tonight.
5 out. I know. It's awful to say the least, but anyway. 69 Forest Hills, I was out there Monday. And so these are just some updated photos. He had a crew out on site. I'll scroll through, but he did, the owner was there. There was a crew on site, further cutting up the trees, and they're actually, so this is obviously this is the backyard, and I'm looking west, bobcat here. There's a fella back there with a chainsaw. And so the bobcat's moving everything up and around, and this isn't where he was piling it. He's piling it up actually towards the front of the house. So these set of photos just kind of scrolled through. Looks like they've taken some brick out, but this is up at the side of the house, way away from the regulated area. And all this material he's pulling out and putting up at the front of the house for now. They did keep a few of the logs, here at the back, so that they can cut them up into lengths and put them in the restoration area, but obviously there's more logs than they're going to need in the restoration area, so they're pulling a majority of it up and out to the front so that it can be removed from the property. Let's see if I can get going in the right direction here. So this is, again, just more of that work. And then I walked down towards where the vernal pool and wetland had been, and I was just curious if I could find Matt Davison's flags, and sure enough, they were there. So there's one here in this photo, and then this is the same flag, and you can see another one here and here hanging in the trees that wasn't visible in the first photo. This is another one on the other side, just coming around the corner from that pond. But this actually beyond is technically the pond floor, and it's interesting. It is dried out. You can see there's some sedges here. There are some shrubs popping up, but I didn't walk out onto it, so I don't know how moist it is right now. Of course, this was on Monday. We'd had some rain over the weekend, but we really are in drought conditions. And hadn't had the monsoon rains that we had, yesterday and today. So, but this was all dried up and definitely looks a whole lot different than it did when Bruce and I were there, and certainly when Matt did his initial investigation. So, and then this is just some additional photos of the area coming back around from the vantage point of the pond, looking back into the yard. So they are working on getting this done. I haven't got a solid response with respect to timing of locating the septic system. I'm going to scroll back through on the photos. So as we're standing here, it's our general understanding that the septic system's in this area where it's already lawn, right? And you can see where this tree line was, and you can see the stumps and this tree line. So this is really, that restoration area. I find it hard to believe that at the end of the day, we're going to have a conflict between the septic system and the restoration area. I think it's just, getting everything on the right scale and getting the surveyor out. The owner did indicate that, I was going to say suburban. He's had a septic company out there to pump the tank and do some work on it. The tank's in good shape, so he's going to have them provide information as to where the tank is located, and then that's going to help get us moving in the right direction. So they're moving ahead. Things are progressing. Not concerned. We're still getting responses from everybody, so I'm not overly concerned with anything at this particular point at this location. Anyone have any questions for me regarding this?
Oh, the question I have is with the plants that are going back in, are we now looking maybe more at a September date? Because I'm not sure putting them in latter half of July or August,
Right.
without somebody going out there and watering on a regular basis, I
Right.
don't see the plant surviving.
No, and I think that's, at the end of the day, Bob, I think that's really where, I think they were optimistic that it might happen earlier, but I really figured that this was gonna be a fall planting. And I'd have to take a look. I think we said that we wanted them in by the fall, but I'd have to go back and take a look at the meeting notes. So, but I can follow up with them and make that absolutely clear that it has to be installed this fall.
And I mean, I say my next comment is sort of tongue in cheek. I'm not sure the septic system is really working well because the grass is not very green.
Well, the house hasn't been occupied for a while, or it was a single occupant for a while.
Okay.
I'm just making a note for my.
Any other questions, comments?
No.
No.
Nope.
Okay, I'm gonna move on, 275 Talcott Notch. This one was from a year ago. We were finishing planting, last spring. I think he finished planting last May, so last year counted as his first growing season. We're into the second full growing season. These are the hemlocks. So Talcott Notch runs north-south, so this is the south side of the property, or it runs north-south on this. So this is the south side of the property, that side away from the wetlands. This is the front area that had a conservation easement. So all the trees, most everything looks healthy, particularly in the front, everything looks healthy. He actually asked if he could plant a couple more hemlocks at the front. I told him he could. He'd like some privacy here. This had been where the driveway had been, and I know we had talked about taking some hemlocks out and mixing in some of the plants, but we've got a good mix of plants through here. When everything was installed originally, we did a plant count, both Bruce Sear and myself, to make sure that the plants that were arriving were the plants that were on the sheet. So he may add a couple of hemlocks here, which I didn't really see to be an issue. Some of these shrubs are going to take a while before they get larger.
Is that what the proposed driveway was?
Correct. So it's all been removed and reseeded and recurbed, so yes. So that's all been corrected. So, and then this photo is looking the other direction. I'm now standing in the existing driveway, looking back south and just taking this view from this direction. You can see the trampoline there that was in the front yard. And then this is the driveway. And they are doing just a little bit of work, some patio work and putting in pavers, so that's what the sand, you'll see there were some crews there and that's what the sand is. They're just putting some pavers in at the front of the house and in the backyard near their deck. Again, nothing near the wetlands and nothing that's unusual activity. These are the conservation markers, so the 4x4 posts with the easement markers on top. And he's looking to just put, so he's run a cable through. It doesn't show, you can see it a little bit here in this photo. It'll show in some of the others. He's looking at putting some ground lights up to shine up into the trees. So that's what he's looking to do there. So there's just some conduit that's been put in and no lights yet. This is now looking the other side, still standing in the driveway, but now I'm looking north. This is the rest of the trees and plants that went in the conservation easement. Here's a easement marker, and here's the rest of the conduit and some of the locations of those landscape lights. These are the row of hemlocks that are up against the brook that runs along the north and then curves around to the western edge of his property, and the brook's just off to the north here past those hemlocks. Of course, it was dry on Monday when I was there. It basically is a lot of stormwater runoff. So it's very susceptible to heavy rain. So I'm sure it's flowing like gangbusters now, and I could probably go out tomorrow morning and it'll be back down to a trickle unless we happen to get rain overnight. So this is just, the rest of these photos are just some of the photos of this planting area right adjacent to this brook. It's all revegetated. There's willows, there's blueberries, there's hemlocks. There were areas on both sides of the brook that were planted. You know, at this time, most things were identifiable, but you could definitely see some of the flowering shrubs on the northern bank. You could see the willows, blueberries. The last photo, I think I was more excited than he was. There's blueberries. There's a whole ton of blueberries on this bush. I was way more excited than he was about it. But nonetheless, they are healthy. There are, some of the willows have some disease on them, so I told him, you know, get in touch with his landscaper to see what can be done and get those willows treated so he's not having to replace them. Yeah, there's something eating the leaves, and the leaves are blistering. Other than that, everything looked really good. To the best that I can determine, all the quantity is still there, and it's in really good shape. And he intends to, he knows there's another report due by the end of this year and fully intends to do it. So everything looks good, and the trees, the plantings for just having 1 year growth, the hemlocks in particular are looking very good. So, so if there's any questions on this one, I'm happy to answer them.
On the other side of the stream,
Yep.
he had like a haul road that,
Yep.
has they like straightened that out?
That was so yes, and there was no evidence of continued, so that's what I looked for, to see if there's any evidence of continued crossing, and there's none.
Okay.
So, and at the time that, when we did all the restoration work last spring, he had raked it and seed had been placed in there as required by the restoration plan. I did not go walk all the way back up through there on Monday, but there was no evidence of crossing going on. So,
Where do we stand on the penalties for this?
so nothing, I haven't, the penalties are still in place. He has submitted to me all of his receipts, so now I need to go through and do a tally. I had hoped to do that for this meeting, but I'll simply say I've been thrown a couple of curveballs as of late. So wearing multiple hats, I did not get to that, but I did make sure that I got out to the site. So we at least know everything's looking great, and that's on the to-do list, to take a look at the financial tally.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Of course. And the last one is 41 Woodruff. This was a considerably smaller replanting. There were 16 plants that had to go in, a combination of shrubs and trees that went in, and all of the plants are there. We did get a report. Ian Cole actually is the wetland scientist on this one, and we did get a report at the end of last year from Ian on this one. Everything's looking fine. I went out to check to make sure that everything's leafing out. They were rather small specimens that were planted, so I had asked the owner to put markers on all the trees. Well, of course, he tried green thread at the base of each of the trees. So we found them, and I suggested maybe red Christmas ribbon or holiday ribbon or something that's going to be a little more yellow, kind of anything but the green, and not at the base of the tree where the leaves are going to accumulate. So he's going to get to that, but we were able to find them intermixed in here. There are some weeds that are popping up that I was able to point out to him. So like, here, pull these out and get rid of these. But he has some silky dogwood. There's some witch hazel. There's some spice bush. There's some alder, and everything was looking okay. Some of the blueberry was looking but overall, they're there, intermixed in here. More than anything, he hasn't, he hasn't he hasn't been doing any additional activity. I did tell him this fall to go ahead and take out the erosion control fence. Most of it's knocked down anyhow. You can see it intermixed in here. The conservation easements obviously are in the markers. So, you know, it's given what we were working with from the get-go, it's not bad in the whole scheme of things. So, and the plants are surviving, which is a good thing. This is another, not one of the taller ones. I think that's one of the silky dogwoods or the alder. So they're doing okay, and again, nothing concerning. He did start to ask about process for doing, you know, talking about his deck and talking about doing some work at the front of his house and talking about a roof and a bunch of different things. So I said, yeah, if you're ready, you know, the deck, then you got to get a permit in. You know, anything at the front of the house obviously is just building permit related, but you know, we walked through that a little bit. He still seems a little uncertain on his timing on all that, but rest assured, Bruce and I'll keep checking in with him every so often. So I have no doubt there won't be any surprises. So we won't have to worry about that again, I don't believe. So
and he's probably lucky we had a mild winter because of his exposed footings.
Yeah.
Shannon, is that tree in the picture damaged?
He has a couple of damaged trees back there that are completely dead. This one, there's a couple of them that we talked about, you know, you could take down and cut, but, you know, let me know. We'll come out. We want to talk to your arborist. We want to talk to, you know, or whoever the landscaper is that's coming in to cut them, you know, just cut them flush. Because they're complete. There's no greenery on the trees. There's like 3 or 4 of them. So he seemed more interested in his deck than he did about the dead trees. So I'm not sure what he's going to do. But I will send an email reminder to him about that if, you know, so I've got it in writing, that if any of these trees are coming out, that he needs to notify us before they come out so we can meet at the property.
Good idea.
So, okay, anything else?
And I think we're in the same boat on this one, or with the
Right.
penalties and stuff.
Correct. So he has submitted his receipts. I need to do a tally and go back to where we were with the fines, and then we can decide how we want to move ahead with that and get a recommendation from the commission on both of these.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is September is early enough.
Sure.
I'm not that concerned about it for 2 weeks, so.
Sure. Okay. And that's all I have for planner's report. Jay, I know you said you had registered for the online DEP course. Did you get a login? Were you able to get started on that?
I haven't gotten anything back from them. Maybe they're bogged down. I don't know. I did it a second time too. I just want to do it. I'm not really upset about it. I just want to make sure that I did it properly, and I would like to do that course, but I haven't gotten anything back from them yet.
So,
it's not that we're bogged down, it's that we're telecommuting.
This is Dave. I had registered last month because I happened to go to the DEEP website and saw that this was available. And it took them like about 10 days to get me registered. And then when I was registered, the course was not yet available yet. But it is now. I did the first 2 modules. 8 modules. They say it takes 8 to 10 hours. The first 2 so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Is there something I should do to find out, or?
No, I think just hold on. You'll get an email from them.
Okay.
Jay, everything's being done. It's all telecommuting now. You don't have anybody in the office to deal with some of the stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Okay. So Dave, maybe by the next meeting, if you haven't got your login information to get started, then let me know and then I can reach out, because at that point then it's, you know, you're looking at almost a month since when you registered, so I would think you would have it certainly by then, so.
Yeah,
Just keep me
okay.
get it, okay?
Okay, yeah, thanks for checking, Shannon. I appreciate it.
No, it's important, and I know you're looking forward
Well,
to doing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything I can absorb is only going to help me understand this stuff, so it is important.
Understood. Okay. That's all I have from a wetland standpoint.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of June 17th? For the wetlands meeting?
Action.
Was there a second?
Second, Robert.
Okay. Comments, questions, corrections?
I had a quick correction, same as the one in our previous minutes. It's 1179 Forest Hills Drive still, instead of Farmington Avenue.
Seriously? All right. All right.
It was also like that at the last meeting, but somehow I muted myself and I wasn't able to get through in time.
All right. We'll catch them. Thank you.
So you gotta change the template.
Yeah, obviously. Goodness. All right, got it.
Is that it?
Correct.
Okay, those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Can I get a motion to approve the June 24th, 2020 site walk minutes?
So moved.
So moved by Robert.
Is there a second?
Second by Rich.
Okay. Bring it up. Any comments, questions, corrections? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining?
Batchin abstains. I wasn't there.
Okay.
All right. The thing is how the time on my computer's going. I'll just say it's 9 o'clock. I started to watch for those wetlands and open conservation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like there's much other business, land acquisition committee report.
Yeah, no, there's nothing on land acquisitions, but I have two, because land acquisitions I think isn't scheduled to meet until next week. Planners report, two things to note. So I don't know if, well, hopefully all of you have received your Farmington Town newsletter in the mail. And if you haven't, then you should shortly. And it's in a lovely blue with our town seal at the top. We did put on not the cover sheet, but on the first page, on your opening page, there is a note about how to preserve Farmington's wetlands and streams. So we've put this in periodically, and I felt, obviously given, again, the 5 out of 6 items on the agenda, we put it back in. I'm not sure if it's helpful or not, but it makes me feel like I've done something proactive. So that's in there. Simple recycling's in there, and then information about our bulky waste collection, household hazardous waste collections, and then some of our stormwater requirements about waste disposal and hazardous waste materials. And we also have a link to the DEP site of what do I do with for disposal of odd items in one's household. So if you haven't seen it or it got buried on the counter, feel free to dig it out. It's also available on the front page of the town's website. So that's there, and we're trying to get the word out about some of these environmental items, and hopefully folks are starting to take them to heart. The other item
Shannon, thanks.
is, oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Second item, I had mentioned it's been a while since we've talked about the planting site that we have by the Little League baseball fields. Annually, we've been doing a restoration project to eradicate knotweed and plant native species. We were going to do a final planting this May. Of course, that got put on hold because of the virus, so that got canceled for this May. But out of the blue, we got a contact from a woman who is part of a grassroots group that is called Weed Wrangle, and there is going to be a knotweed removal event. She had originally scheduled it for Saturday. We've pushed it to Sunday. I realize not everybody's doing something on the 4th this year, but nonetheless, we've pushed it to Sunday. And she's teamed up with the high school ecological committee, and we're going to have like 10 or 15 volunteers out removing knotweed in the planting area on Sunday morning, which will be great because I haven't had a chance to be out there this spring. I'm just tied up with other things. So it'll be great to get the knotweed cleared out of there, and then also get in touch with the high school group and see if there's any interest on their part. Perhaps we'll do it again in early August, early to mid-August, before everybody's headed back to school. So it should provide a nice opportunity to get that area cleaned up. So that's it from a planner's report standpoint.
Where is that in relation to the baseball fields?
So if you come down Wanamasa, let's see here, I think I had up our town. All right, it's down the first baseline of off of Wanamasa. So if you were to go walk towards the Big Bird Bridge,
yeah,
and go fishing,
yeah,
it's down. It's before you get to the Big Bird. It's like right off the edge of the parking area. It's right
okay,
there. So, and we've got winterberry and spirea. There's a lot of different things that we've got planted. So it's right. So here's Wanamasa, first baseline. The parking area, basically the planting area, is right here. So you come off, you drive. This loop road goes behind. We just park in here, and this is the planting area right in here, but it's just all filled with knotweed. So we've been chipping away at it and trying to make progress on removal of knotweed and encouraging invasive. It was started with Connecticut Water. It's in the Connecticut Water's aquifer, their sand and stone aquifer, and we were approached. It was actually my first year here. They reached out and said it's part of their charter and missions that they have in place to improve their aquifers and water quality. So it fit. It's easily accessible. It's town land. There were native species. It was or invasive species that could easily get eradicated, or not easily, but quantifiable anyhow. So it's been an ongoing love-hate relationship with knotweed.
What time?
10 o'clock-ish on Sunday. I can send an email out with all the final details if anyone, out for a walk. Even if you want to just come for a walk and see all the shenanigans, that's fine too. So that's it. Did I lose Bob?
I was on mute, so I forgot about that.
Okay. Oh my gosh, what did I do to you?
No, you didn't do anything. I had it on mute, and the phone, the lights went down because it wasn't active, and I forgot the mute button was still pushed. I'm trying to make sure you don't get background noise from me.
Thank you, Mr. Hannon.
You're welcome. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes of June 17th, 2020 Conservation Commission meeting?
So moved, Statchen.
Is there a second?
Okay, Wolf.
Okay, so having a motion on the floor to approve the minutes of June 17th, 2020. Any comments, questions, corrections? Hearing nothing. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? So be it. And I've got about 9:08 to close the meeting.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank
4th of July.
You too.
Hey, good night.
Good night, everyone.
And
All right, everyone. Enjoy the long weekend.
You too.
you too.